Hey Phyllis, how you doing? I'm going to read you a beautiful. This is such a beautiful quote from Rumi, the poet Rumi. Rumi said, "To become spiritual, you must die to self and come alive in the Lord. Only then will the mysteries of God fall from your lips. To die to self through self-discipline causes suffering but brings you everlasting life." That's beautiful. That's obviously a very similar parable that's in the Bible that says, I can't remember the exact word, but thou shalt seek the kingdom within and receive all of God's righteousness. So this has been so true for me with overcoming my social anxiety and with my whole journey with healing with my dad. All the things I did wrong, all the dishonesty, all the cheating in relationships, letting people abuse me, abusing other people, stopping addictions. So I wanted to share some things in this video that have really helped me. Now, I'm speaking to a lot of people lately with social anxiety and I'm helping them through their anxieties. And I completely understand the mindset of a sufferer of social anxiety because of suffering for so many years. So, right, as a matter of fact, Rumi is right. You do actually have to suffer. And I remember when I was at the earlier stages of having social anxiety, I didn't want to suffer. I did everything I could to avoid people, to avoid social situations and to avoid going to events. I just couldn't deal with it. The worst part for me was feeling uncomfortable. It was the feeling uncomfortable around people and feeling paralysed. I couldn't express myself. I couldn't be myself in the conversation. I couldn't say what I wanted to say, or everything just didn't feel right. I felt completely out of alignment. I didn't feel emotionally there. I was always in my head. I just couldn't connect, especially with new people. So I'm just trying to unravel now because I feel like I'm going backwards, if that makes sense. So I'm literally going backwards, breaking down what I did to get to where I've got to, and I'm just sort of unloading it onto YouTube. So just give me a second. So I've been thinking about this a lot all this week for months, and it almost feels, no matter how many YouTube videos I do for social anxiety and overcoming it, it almost feels no matter how many videos I do, it's not enough. I need to do more to stress the point, because no matter how much I say it to people, most people watching the YouTube videos, I want to be optimistic, but I have to be honest, I think most people are still not going to go and face it. And I only know that through my own suffering with social anxiety and hiding it for so many years and hiding it in all of my rationalizations. I mean, I was even hiding it 3 years ago as someone who's a famous dating coach. I was really struggling with it and I buried it. And I wasn't fully aware of it on a conscious level. It was only when I started to work with Jeff over 2 years ago, and all my relationships started to break down and I had an identity crisis and I just wasn't happy in my life. That's when I thought, I can't run away from this no more. So it's true what Rumi said, it's very beautiful. Let me just, hold on a second. I missed. So, yeah, he says, to become spiritual you must die to self, come alive in the Lord. Yeah, to die to self through self-discipline causes suffering but brings everlasting life. So what he's saying is, the actual perception of the suffering is not suffering if you understand why you're going through it and what you're going to get out of it. That's what I really wanted to say. My words are not coming out today, a bit tired. So Jeff has said the same thing, my mentor. He's spoken about the concept of changing your perception of suffering. Rumi's talking about it. Johnny Berba's talking about it. I've actually lived it. I've got experience. It's not theoretical. It's not. I read the poem because the poem is beautiful, but the poem is only breaking down what I've done over, I don't know how many years it's taken me. It's taken me over 10 years to overcome social anxiety, and I don't want to put people off. If you watch this video and think, fucking hell, it's going to take me 10. It's not going to take you 10 years. It took me 10 years because I was not, well, of course deep down I knew I had it, but I was very insecure and I hid it and I rationalised it. Most of my rationalisation was through going out and having sex with women. And then of course, being popular at the time and teaching other men, my ego was being so fulfilled, it was hard to let that go. So I had to diet. Obviously, I'm not the same guy that you see on YouTube a few years ago. I had to kill that old self. That self was the socially anxious guy to become this self. So I went through a tremendous amount of suffering. So I totally understand how people feel. I literally died. I had a nervous breakdown. I've never experienced so much emotional suffering. I didn't even know it was possible for a human being and myself to be able to feel these feelings and go through it. But I don't want to put you off or excite you, because that, sorry, I just checked. That end bit that Rumi said is so beautiful when he says, discipline causes suffering, but brings you everlasting life. And that's how I feel. I really do feel like that. I feel born again, and that's what the Christians, I literally feel born again. And I know deep down, everyone who has social anxiety intuitively knows there is a part of them that it wants to be awakened. And when I mean, I don't even have to quote this because I understand it for myself. The sufferer of social anxiety is frightened of killing their false self, because the false self is your whole reality. I'm sorry to scare you, I don't mean to scare you, but when I got this realization over a period of time, and it came slowly with working with Jeff, I had to digest this slowly, because I think it would have just completely, I probably would have ended up in a mental hospital, to be honest, because it would have been too much for me to deal with. So I'm trying to excite you and not make you panic, but make you excited about the surrendering and the suffering, which is going to be, you know, periodically. It's not going to take you 10 years, you could do it in a matter of months, maybe a year, maybe 6 months, depends on the process that you use, but you cannot avoid the suffering. And the suffering is the uncomfortable feelings around people. But if you, I mean, what I personally did, I'm just trying to, it's really hard for me to explain sometimes, because it's just hard to break this down. It's not a method as such. It is a process. It is a process. And I'm trying to get this right. Your own intuition will give you the method. Does that make sense? So no one is a better teacher than you. Like even myself, I'm not a better teacher than your intuition. All the teaching I do is just helping people, supporting them. And I suppose really coming from my own experience and helping you and supporting you through your experience. But the feelings are the same. All of us that have had social anxiety, we all feel the same things. When you're talking to people, that blank out when you go in your head and you're looking at a person, but it's as if you've jumped out of the body. You've jumped out of the body, they're in their body if they don't have social anxiety. They're talking to you, and it's almost like you're in shock. You're in shock that there's a human being in front of you, and it's fear, it's trauma. It's triggered you off. So that is the suffering going through that. But if you can actually stay in the suffering, this is what I did psychologically. Got to a stage where I just started to surrender to it. So I was in a situation socially or events, and I'd literally just say in my head, God, if this is what you want from me, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to withstand the embarrassment and the stress. And every time I suffered, it got a little bit easier every time. And that little bit of easier, I still felt uncomfortable, but I felt slightly less uncomfortable. And I was able to, you know, when you're in social situations, you're struggling with social anxiety, it feels that you can't breathe, and it feels like every part of you that is authentic, it just gets stolen. The analogy for me would be like, if you've been training in boxing on the heavy bag for a long time, and you feel that you're good on the bag, and you feel comfortable, but you know that the real deal is in the sparring. You know that there's only a certain amount of hitting the bag that you can do. If you want to get good at boxing, you've got to box. So the first time you get in the ring, most people, all your authenticity gets lost. So everything you did on the bag doesn't work in the ring, because you've got someone who wants to rip your head off, and especially if they're experienced. And social anxiety is a little bit like that, in the sense that when you watch YouTube videos online, or you read books about social anxiety, you get a theoretical understanding, but when you're actually forced into a situation, you haven't got so much time to think. And this is what causes the fight or flight. You get triggered, but you need to keep putting yourself in that situation over and over and over again. And you need to support yourself before you go into the situation. You need to support yourself during the situation and when you come away. Because I think what happens to a lot of people, when it used to happen to me, when you've got social phobia, you go into social situations, you feel that you've been trashed, You take it out on the person, you project it onto them. That's where a lot of the projected hate comes from. You feel that they're bullying you. That's how I felt. Of course, that came back to my father, who was bullying me, but everyone else I met wasn't trying to bully me. This was paranoia. I was projecting my fear out. So you kind of blame them for your own. You blame them for your fear. So you go away feeling frustrated and angry because in the conversation you feel like you've lied to the person and cheated yourself because you can't say what you want to say. You're not really in sync with what's going on. So when you come away after that, you've got to kind of lift yourself up. You've got to be kind to yourself. That's what I do. You've got to say, I'm doing the best I can. But over time and through more practice, you'll start finding your voice. I was working with someone the other day, I can't remember who said it, it's very beautiful, and they said, I'm finding my voice, I'm finding out who I am, I know, and I said, that's a great line. So, the same analogy with the boxing. The first time I did sparring in the boxing, I mean, I've been fighting on the streets for all my life. I was quite a good fist fighter, very good at street fighting. And I did a lot of training on the pads, on the bag, shadow boxing, but when I got in the ring, I got destroyed. I sparred with, I can't remember, there was a guy I sparred with who was older than me, an English guy, and I sparred with, I think it was a Polish guy, a Russian guy, and they beat the shit out of me, and I felt so humiliated when I came out. I was almost crying because I was so shocked that I could lose. I didn't like losing, but I came away from that experience and I felt like quitting. I remember coming home to my nan and I just said, Nan, my face was marked up, and it wasn't so much the beating that hurt me, it was my pride was dented. I felt it brought up my issues it felt abandoned. It's weird to feel that, but losing in a boxing match after training so long, but I knew I could either quit or carry on. I put myself back in the situation, I started to get better and better in sparring, and then those feelings went away, I started to be able to hold my own. It's exactly the same analogy for social anxiety. So if you've got social anxiety, for example, and you spoke to someone who's really confident, I feel a bit arrogant saying this, but I don't. Let's say you spoke to me, for example, and you're at the earlier stages of social anxiety, you're really nervous. It's probably going to feel quite stressful for you to speak to me. I mean, I'm very understanding, I had it, so I would make it comfortable for you. But if let's say I didn't know you and you didn't know I was teaching and you met me, it may feel stressful. You probably feel quite angry towards me, or if you spoke to anyone who's confident, because it feels like they are, it feels like you're being destroyed socially. But when you come away from that situation and you assess it, and then you go back into another social situation, maybe someone who's less confident than me or less confident than the confident person, you're going to be able to feel more relaxed with them. Does that make sense? And Jeff said this as well, and it's brilliant what he said, and it's very relevant. A lot of his truths have been the same truths as mine. He said, everyone is your teacher. He was referring to just learning in life. He talked about if someone makes you feel jealous, if they bring up anger or resentment in you, they are teaching you where you're insecure. And it is true when I think about it, when I look back. Even people that bullied me, even my dad, everyone was my teacher with social anxiety, which is, when you think about it, it's fantastic, because if you can't afford coaching, a lot of people say they can't afford my programs, you can go and get free coaching everywhere. And I got that realization, I can't remember when I got it, it doesn't really matter, about 2 years ago. And I actually got that with doing day game. Every woman I speak to on the street is my teacher. It's true, it's not just it's not just poetry, it's actually real. Every single person you speak to is your teacher. If they make you feel insecure, if they make you feel inadequate, if they don't allow you to, if they don't let you speak in the conversation, they cut you off and they dominate you, that pain that they cause you, believe me, that's gonna grow you. It's just a change in mindset, and whether you like it or not, and this is hope for everyone with social anxiety, as soon as you decide to start working on it, you're going to start growing. But I think what happens with a lot of people who are working on social confidence and social anxiety, the growth to start with is very slow. It's the same when I work with people on my 6 weeks program. I'm always really honest about my teaching. It's life-changing, but the growth is very, very slow. It wouldn't work otherwise. Otherwise, I'd be giving people quick fixes. I do the best I can with the videos and the products, but the growth is slow because you won't be able to handle. You can't rush it because you basically have a breakdown. That's what happened to me, but my breakdown came from years of abuse and violence and cheating on women and a lot of trauma from the past. So you can only grow as fast as your psychology and your emotional system body allows you to. And obviously everyone is different. So yeah, of course I've worked with a lot of people. Some people grow slightly quicker than others, but usually the growth is at a slow rate. But listen up, but every 0.5, every week or every time you practice, it starts adding up. It's like saving up when you're a kid. You know, when you first start saving up, everyone had a piggy bank, right, growing up. You put a few pounds in and it just feels like the money's not going up because you're analysing it every day. So now I've got £1, £1.50, £2, or if you're American, $2. But when you forget about it and you just keep enjoying life saving up, before you know it, your whole jar's full and you're able to buy a computer or a console. So social anxiety is like that, and self-esteem is like that. If you don't really notice it at first, because I didn't notice my changes even when I first started working with Jeff. They were very, very gradual. And it was only when I looked at some of my YouTube videos and I seen the difference, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it, and I was appalled at my old self. I was quite embarrassed about how I used to be. I could see how insecure I was, how anxious I was, how cocky, how unsocially calibrated I was, but I couldn't see it obviously when I was in that full self. So when I work with people, I don't just say this for the sake of saying it. I tell them, you're doing amazing, you're growing. A lot of students will say to me, do you think so? I can't really notice it. You won't notice it initially. A teacher will notice it, or your friends and family. So, like I said, I feel at the moment intuitively a lot of people are struggling with social anxiety because you feel that you're not getting anywhere with it. And I know that my 30-day anxiety program has helped a lot of people. I've had a lot of emails from people saying it's changed their life. And obviously, not everyone who follows my YouTube channel has severe social anxiety. Some people just need confidence and conversation skills. But I'm really speaking to people in this video who've had severe social anxiety. So the analogy I use with the boxing, you have to suffer. But the suffering comes at a cost of you choosing to suffer, which is what Jeff said, which makes sense. He called it deliberate suffering. But I want to just explain, because we've got this idea in our society, when we say the word suffering, the first thing we say is we pull away, I don't want to suffer. But you're not suffering at the cost of being hurt or being rejected or being abandoned. That feels like it. You're suffering at the cost of loving who you are and getting success in your life. So I'll say it again. When you've got social phobia, everyone you talk to is your teacher. Everyone. The guy in the grocery store, at the family gatherings, the job interview, your co-workers, it feels like they're enemies. That's how it felt for me. It felt like everyone I spoke to was an enemy. Even everyone looked evil at that time, because that's my projection. That was the anger in myself and the distrust. So if you start changing your mentality, you can actually find pleasure in social anxiety. And I know for a fact, because I did it myself. And I even did it when I was doing the day game, when I was going on a lot of dates, and I was really conflicted. I was like, part of me was like, I'm a confident guy. I'm the guy who goes out, picks up women. I teach men how to meet women, and I'm clearly not being arrogant here. I'm having sex with lots of women, but there's another part of me going, I'm not comfortable. I couldn't look at it. But eventually, the part that wasn't comfortable was who I truly was. That came up, and that's in line with Rumi's poem. You have to kill the false self. So effectively what you're doing is, that social mask that you wear to protect you from spiritually evolving and overcoming social phobia and connecting with people and being honest, that mask needs to be shattered. But you can't just go metaphorically, you can't just rip the mask off straight away, because you just won't be able to cope. So I couldn't have got in and sparred with the best guy in the boxing club, because he'd have ripped my head off, could have put me in hospital. I had to build up the ranks slowly. And that is the analogy. This is kind of what I've been explaining. Now, obviously, you have to follow your intuition, contradictory to what I just said. If you feel that you're ready to rip your mask off and go, then do it, great. But in my experience, it needed to be done over a period of time, because this is very, very, it's very sensitive work, building self-esteem and recovering from trauma. And I'm still improving as a teacher as well. I'm trying to get as good as I can. And one of the mistakes I made as a teacher, and I think it's a good mistake that I made, it didn't harm anyone, but I was in such a hurry to change people and help them and give them everything I'd learned. And I realised that it was too much for people. So that's why I created a lot of longer term programs, because I stopped doing the weekend workshops in London. I enjoyed them. Yes, they've helped people a lot, but I just found it wasn't enough time to help people to overcome social phobia in a weekend. Realistically, I wish I could do it. It was enough to give people a taster and confidence, and I think it is quite beneficial for people that don't really have social anxiety and they're just lacking in maybe going up and talking to strangers. But for people with severe social phobia and trauma and panic attacks, you've got to be careful of it, and you've got to grow into this. So that's why growth is slow initially, but if you stick at it and you practice, the time just goes so quick. Before you know it, you've become confident. So this is what's really helped me just outline those things: is deliberately suffering, understanding why you're suffering, understanding what's going to come, which is the kingdom within. I love that term, it's beautiful. The self-love, and to start feeling comfortable, and you will start feeling the difference. You'll notice, and that's always how growth happens, isn't it? Where you'll be in a situation and you just kind of get a bit of clarity where you say, wow, I'm more comfortable than I used to be. And that's exactly how I started to feel going on dates with women. It was no different. Everything I've ever done socially has always been the same. So public speaking in front of 50 people was pretty much no different to sitting face to face and having that intimate conversation with an attractive woman that would have intimidated me back then. There was no difference. It's just, there's no difference. 50 people public speaking was scary, was uncomfortable for me. I felt judged, I felt naked, I was frightened. But it was the same feeling sitting down when I first started going on dates with attractive women, and it was a lot to deal with, but I suffered it. And then eventually I learnt to go from feeling very uncomfortable at the start of public speaking to feeling very comfortable and loving it. Same on dates. Now, I don't want to give people the impression that I never feel social fear, because sometimes I do feel it. Of course, I'm coming from a lifetime worth of anxiety, so I get it mild sometimes myself. Sometimes I can get triggered in certain situations. There's certain characteristics of people that can bring things up in me. Again, same thing I tell myself, that person is teaching me. It's not personal, they're not trying to harm me, and that's more room for me to grow, and that always makes me really happy. And I think, I've grown so much because I've taught. So a lot of you are saying that you'd like to teach. I think that would be a great idea. But I've got to be honest, and of course it's your choice. I think to teach people, you need to be in a process, obviously, where whatever you're teaching is working for you, or you're at least in the midst of overcoming it. You've got to be honest with people, otherwise you're not really going to help people, you're not going to help yourself. But like I said, you can not listen to anything I say. I'm not God, I don't know everything, but everything I've said has tremendously helped me and helped other people. And there's just someone who comes to mind. I remember working with my friend Nick, and I remember with Nick, very similar to myself in personality and in sticking points, and his growth was very slow as well to start with. And I said, you are really growing. And he was saying to me he couldn't really notice it, but when I seen him on the last session on the 6 weeks program, and he took some time out and did more practice himself, massive difference, so much more confidence. And then he came down to my social circle event and gave a public talk, and he kept coming, and now he's been going out to events, making new friends. It's incredible. So this is not just me I'm talking about, I've actually seen it with people. And I've got so many other accounts of students. I'm trying to think, there's so many, there's hundreds. My friend Dean, another one as well, very similar to myself, very similar personality, and he gave a talk at my social circle event, and his growth was very slowly, every week, just tiny, and then bang. So it is a gradual process, it is deliberate suffering for the kingdom within, as what Rumi says.